The alien princess's broken body hit the ground with a wet thud as her ship exploded behind her, her people's betrayal complete. 22-year-old engineering student Derek Henderson had been burning the midnight oil in the Interstellar Academy lab, tweaking the containment field on his prototype fusion reactor. Right as the resonance frequency locked in, a concussive blast rocked the building. Bolting upright, he raced to the observation window and gaped at the smoke billowing from the crater in the quad. A sleek alien craft, now a crumpled mess, lay at the center. He sprinted outside and skidded to a stop by the wreckage, transfixed by a slender grey hand weakly pushing against the warped hatch. Derek strained and heaved, ripping the hatch open. He dragged the limp pilot out and rolled to safety an instant, before the ruptured power cell ignited, engulfing the ship in flames. Catching his breath, he looked down at an unconscious young female alien, her elaborate outfit marking her as Gamelon royalty. She stirred and croaked out, "I am Princess Umbra. My people, betrayed," before going limp again. Shouts rang out across the quad as a mob of alien students closed in, rage contorting their faces. "Gamelon scum!" they roared, hurling garbage and debris. A Zorlak male snarled, "Your kind slaughtered my family." A Frillian spat, "You don't belong here." The crowd swelled and pressed closer. Scooping up Umbra, Derek shielded her with his body as projectiles pelted his back. He shouldered through the mob and sprinted for the infirmary, the baying horde on his heels. Bursting through the infirmary doors, he skidded to a stop, stomach dropping at the closed sign hastily taped to the medic's desk. The din of the alien mob grew louder outside, their curses turning more vicious. Setting his jaw, Derek charged out the back entrance and vanished into the shadows of the staff parking structure. Once he was sure they hadn't been followed, he laid Umbra down and flipped on his comlink to alert the authorities, but his finger hovered over the transmit key. The sheer vitriol and hate the mob had for the Gamelons. This went way deeper than he ever realized. Could he trust anyone else with her safety right now? Who knew how many felt the same, even in the police or government? No, until he knew what the hell was going on, he'd have to hide her and tend to her himself. Sighing, he gently slung Umbra over his shoulder and crept towards his dorm under cover of darkness. For days, Umbra hovered between life and death on Derek's narrow dorm bed, her breathing shallow and labored. Terrified of being discovered, Derek snuck into the campus clinic after hours, stuffing his backpack with gauze, antiseptic, and emergency rations. He spent sleepless nights tending to her wounds, praying to gods he didn't believe in that she would pull through. As color slowly returned to Umbra's mottled grey skin, the wall of fear and suspicion between them began to crack. In whispered conversations, Umbra revealed the horror she had uncovered. "My Uncle Moldor is a monster," she rasped, clutching Derek's hand like a lifeline. "He's planning a coup. He'll kill my father, seize the throne, subjugate our people. I found proof, but he sent his dogs after me before I could warn anyone." Derek listened intently, a sick feeling growing in his gut. He'd seen the hate in that mob's eyes. What if Moldor's treachery ran deeper than even Umbra realized? "We have to get this evidence to the Galactic Council," he said firmly. "But we need to be smart. If your uncle's influence spreads as far as it seems, we can't trust anyone, not yet." Just then, a meaty fist pounded on the door, making them both jump. "Resident inspection," a harsh voice barked. "Open up." Umbra's eyes went wide with fear. Derek held a finger to his lips and gestured frantically for her to hide. She climbed unsteadily to her feet and staggered for the closet, pulling the door shut behind her just as the lock gave way, with a splintering crack. The hulking frame of a Kronon security officer shouldered into the room, followed by the sneering human head of campus security. "We've had reports of someone harboring a fugitive Gamelon," he growled, piggy eyes darting around the room. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you, boy?" Derek forced his face into a mask of innocent confusion, pulse hammering in his ears. "No Gamelons here, sir. I'm just a loyal, law-abiding student." The Kronon snorted in disbelief, shoving past Derek to ransack the tiny dorm. He upended the mattress, dumped out the desk drawers, tossed the wardrobe. Derek held his breath as the alien lumbered towards the closet, meaty fist closing around the handle. A piercing klaxon split the air, emergency lights flashing. "Fire alarm," Derek gasped, lunging for his bug-out bag before the security chief could react. In one fluid motion, he wrenched open the closet door, grabbed Umbra's hand, and launched them both out the window. They plummeted 2 stories before hitting the evac slide, tumbling into the bushes in a tangle of limbs. "Run!" Derek hissed, dragging Umbra behind him in a flat-out sprint. His mind raced as they pelted across the quad, realizing the terrible truth. Nowhere on campus was safe for them anymore. "We need to get off-world," he panted. "Now! The spaceport is our only chance." Derek's heart pounded as he snuck through the crowded spaceport with Umbra, her grey skin hidden beneath a stolen cloak. Blending into the throng of travelers, they slipped past security checkpoints and ducked into a massive cargo freighter. As the ship rumbled to life and blasted off, they collapsed against a stack of crates in the dim hold, gasping for breath. "We made it," Derek panted, grinning at Umbra. She managed a weak smile back, pulling a small data chip from her robes. "This has all the evidence of my uncle's treachery," she said, pressing it into Derek's hand. "We have to get it to General Trazen on Chiron. He's the only one left loyal to my father." Derek turned the chip over, marveling at how something so small could bring down a tyrant. But before he could respond, the ship lurched violently, sending them sprawling. Scrambling to a viewport, Derek's stomach dropped. "We're changing course," he cried, pointing at the massive Gamelon warship looming ahead. "Moldor's assassins must have seized the bridge." Umbra's face hardened. "Then we take it back." They burst out of the hold, racing through the corridors. Derek grabbed a wrench off a maintenance cart, wielding it like a club as they charged onto the bridge. Inside, a dozen Gamelon assassins leveled blasters at the crew huddled on their knees. "The data chip and the princess now," the lead assassin growled, "or these worms die." Derek and Umbra locked eyes, a wordless plan passing between them. She hurled the chip to Derek and launched herself at the assassin with a blood-curdling scream. He caught it and sprinted for the escape pods, assassins hot on his heels. Umbra grappled with the leader, slamming his head into a console. The crew scattered as she snatched up his blaster and fired, dropping 2 more assassins as they tried to rush her. "Go evacuate," she yelled to the crew, sealing the bridge doors. More assassins pounded on the other side as warning klaxons blared. Derek skidded around a corner, ducking blaster fire from the assassins pursuing him. He was steps from an escape pod when a hulking Gamelon emerged from an alcove, blocking his path. "Nowhere left to run, Earther," he sneered, leveling his blaster. A deafening explosion rocked the ship, sending the assassin tumbling. Derek lunged past him into the pod, slamming the hatch closed just as the ship's artificial gravity failed. Through the porthole, he saw the assassins flailing as they were sucked out a blown airlock. Strapping in, he punched the eject, stomach lurching as the pod blasted away from the crippled freighter. Gamelon fighters swarmed around it, hauling it into the warship's hangar with tractor beams. His last glimpse was of Umbra, standing defiant on the bridge, blaster in hand as the doors exploded inward. The pod tumbled towards the blue-green orb of Chiron, alarms wailing as it shook violently. Derek gripped the restraints, praying it would hold together long enough to reach the surface. The data chip seemed to burn in his pocket, the sudden weight of its importance hitting him. Umbra had sacrificed herself to secure their escape. Now, parsecs apart, the fate of her people rested on them both. Derek delivering the chip to General Trazen, and Umbra surviving to expose her uncle. As the pod hit the upper atmosphere in a blaze of heat and shuddering metal, Derek could only watch Moldor's warship, shrinking to a distant point. Umbra's fate, as uncertain as his own. He closed his eyes against the brilliant orange flames engulfing the view screen, the roar of re-entry drowning out all other thoughts except one. He had to find Trazen before Moldor's killers found him. Derek's escape pod screamed through Chiron's atmosphere, control panels flashing red and alarms blaring. It slammed into the grimy streets of the Undercity, skidding and spinning in a shower of sparks. Derek kicked the crumpled hatch open, staggering out into the neon-soaked gloom. Battered and bloodied, he clutched his side and scanned the shadows. Menacing figures emerged from the alleys, a motley gang of humans and aliens in stained leathers, crude weapons in hand. "Well, what do we have here?" the leader sneered, a hulking Kronon with a jagged scar bisecting his face. "Looks like a lost little Earther far from home." Derek reacted on instinct, smashing his elbow into the Kronon's nose with a sickening crunch. The brute reeled back, howling in pain. "Get him," the Kronon roared, blood gushing down his chin. "I want that data chip." But there were too many. They pressed in, pummeling him from all sides. Derek crashed to the ground, desperately shielding the chip. The Kronon loomed over him, raising a jagged chunk of metal for the killing blow. Derek rolled, scooping up a fistful of gritty street filth and flinging it in the alien's eyes. The Kronon staggered back, temporarily blinded. Seizing his chance, Derek scrambled to his feet and sprinted into the labyrinth of alleys, the enraged gang hot on his heels. He ran until his lungs burned, darting and weaving through the trash-strewn backstreets. Finally, he shook his pursuers in a maze of neon signs and flickering holo ads. He slumped against a grimy wall, gasping for breath. Derek fumbled for his comlink, hands shaking as he tried to call up General Trazin's private channel. But the device only spat static. The signal was jammed. He cursed under his breath. Moldor's handiwork, no doubt. He needed a plan fast. Umbra was a prisoner, the data chip their only hope of stopping Moldor's coup. But he couldn't do it alone. He had to find Trazin. But how? The acrid stench of cheap booze and stale sweat wafted from a nearby doorway. A flickering sign sputtered to life above it, the rusted wreck cantina. Derek's lip curled in disgust, but he was out of options. He slipped inside, the din of drunken aliens hitting him like a wall. Keeping his head down, he shouldered through the crowd to the bar, signaling for a drink. As he pretended to nurse the toxic-looking concoction, he strained to hear the conversations around him, desperate for any scrap of intel. A slurred voice rose above the din, speaking in Gamelon. Derek's translator implant crackled to life. He risked a glance. A Gamelon officer, his uniform in disarray, was sprawled across a booth, deep in his cups. "I'm telling you," the officer rambled, waving his glass for emphasis and sloshing foul-smelling liquor over the table. "Lord Moldor's got it all planned out. Amassing a secret fleet in the Vortex Nebula, he is. Gonna squash Gamelon like a bug." His drinking buddy, a grizzled merc, grunted. "What about the princess? Heard she escaped with evidence that could bring Moldor down." The officer let out a nasty laugh. "Not for long, Moldor's got her now. Locked up tight on his flagship, plans to execute her once the fleet reaches Gamelon." He took a long swig, belching. "Gonna frame her for treason first, though. Stage an attack on the palace here, make it look like she's behind it. That'll justify the execution." Derek's blood ran cold. He had to warn General Trazin before it was too late, but he needed more than drunken ramblings. He needed proof. Thinking fast, Derek slipped into a storage room and swiped a technician's coveralls. Pulling a cap low over his face, he crept back out into the cantina. He stumbled into the Gamelon officer, planting a micro-recorder on his collar with a deft flick of his wrist. Hours later, hunched over the recorder in a dingy flophouse, Derek finally had the evidence he needed. The officer had spilled everything: Moldor's plans for the coup, the false flag attack, Umbra's impending execution. He had to get this to Trazin now. Derek raced through the streets on a stolen speeder, the recorder clutched tight to his chest. He skidded to a halt outside the palace gates, just as a massive explosion ripped through the compound. The shockwave hurled him from the speeder, ears ringing. Gamelon fighters streaked overhead, lasers strafing the palace grounds. Alarms wailed as smoke poured from gaping holes in the walls. Moldor's attack had begun. Derek staggered to his feet, drawing his blaster. He charged through the shattered gates, ducking and weaving through the chaos. Gamelon soldiers in Moldor's colours swarmed the courtyard, locked in fierce battle with the palace guards. He fought his way into the palace, the stench of smoke and blood choking the air. Debris rained down as he sprinted through crumbling hallways. A wounded guard sprawled in a doorway, grabbed at his ankle, eyes wide with terror. "General Trazen," the guard rasped. "In the comm center." Derek burst into the ruined chamber, a wall of flames surging behind him. Trazen was pinned beneath a collapsed beam, his face a mask of pain. Derek heaved the debris away, hauling the general to his feet. Trazen sagged against him, clutching a shattered arm. Derek held up the recorder. "I have proof of his treachery, the princess's innocence, but it's not enough, is it? We need to get this to the king." Trazen shook his head. "Ozai will never believe it, not without the data chip. Moldor's lies have poisoned him." His eyes lit with sudden inspiration, despite the pain. "The flagship. If you can disable the jammer, I can broadcast the recording. Expose Moldor's deception." Derek swallowed hard. "I'll do it. Umbra's on that ship. I'm going to save her, and I'll destroy the jammer while I'm at it." Trazen clasped his good hand on Derek's shoulder. "I can get you on board. I have a stealth fighter hidden with command codes that will get you into the hangar." He met Derek's eyes fiercely. "Save the princess. Stop Moldor. The fate of Chiron, of all Gamelon, rests on you." Derek nodded grimly. "I won't fail." Minutes later, he was in the cockpit of Trazen's stealth fighter, knuckles white on the controls. Derek gunned the engines and roared into the smoke-choked sky, the battered city receding behind him. Moldor's flagship loomed ahead, a hulking behemoth bristling with guns. Derek armed the ship's meager weapons, jaw set with determination. He had only one chance, one final desperate gambit: fly in undetected, find Umbra, destroy the jammer, or Chiron and the galaxy would fall. Derek's stolen Gamelon armor clanked as he raced through the flagship's corridors, heart pounding. Blaster rifle clutched tight, he followed Trazen's map toward the brig, ducking into alcoves to avoid patrols. Suddenly alarms shrieked to life, red lights flashing. "Intruder alert!" a robotic voice blared. "All units to Sector 7G." They crashed to the deck in a tangle of limbs, Derek's helmet skittering away. He scrambled for his blaster. The Gamelon soldier leapt to his feet, weapon leveled at Derek's face. The soldier's eyes flew wide in shocked recognition. "You!" he snarled. "You're the human who kidnapped my sister." Derek blinked. The insignia on the man's armor, those furious eyes, he knew that face. Prince Razna, Umbra's brother. "I didn't kidnap her," Derek shouted, diving for Razna's gun. "I rescued her from Moldor's assassins." "Liar!" Raznor roared. They scuffled violently, Raznor's shot sparking off a bulkhead. "Moldor said the assassins were your accomplices." They slammed against the wall, locked in desperate combat. Raznor's comlink clattered to the floor. "Raznor, come in." Moldor's voice crackled from the device, laced with urgent fury. "The Earthling is here on the ship. He's trying to assassinate your father. Umbra is his accomplice. Kill them both on sight." Raznor wrenched his blaster free and jammed the muzzle under Derek's chin, murder in his eyes. Derek went very still. "If I kidnapped Umbra," he said evenly, "why would I be here to rescue her now? How did I even get on this ship?" Raznor hesitated, confusion warring with rage on his face. His wrist display suddenly chimed. An incoming message on a private channel. Raznor glanced at it, then did a double take. His face drained of color as he read, blaster wavering. Realization and horror dawned in Raznor's eyes as the awful truth sank in. His uncle's treachery laid bare. He staggered back from Derek, stricken. Pounding boots in the corridor, shouts of "There, open fire!" A squad of Gamelon soldiers rounded the corner, blasters spitting deadly light. Derek tackled Raznor into an open doorway as bolts stitched the wall above them. "Shoot to kill on Moldor's orders," the squad leader bellowed. Blaster fire chewed through their meager cover. Jaw clenched, Raznor gave a tight nod. He popped up to return fire, scattering the attackers. "I know a quick route to the brig. I'll lead. You cover me." They fought their way down the corridor, leapfrogging between archways. Derek's engineering skills let him jury-rig a makeshift minefield from a damaged power conduit, buying precious seconds. At last they skidded to a halt outside the brig, panting and singed. The heavy door was sealed, the control panel a spider web of cracks. Derek frantically spliced wires, sweat dripping, as Rasnor unleashed covering fire. The door shrieked open. They stormed in, blasters up. Umbra was shackled to the far wall, one eye swollen shut, her face a mask of bruises, but the defiant set of her jaw was unbroken. "Rasnor," she cried, "don't listen to Mal." "I know," Rasnor cut her off grimly. "Moldor betrayed us all. We're getting you out." Derek attacked the control panel, fingers flying. The cuffs snapped open and Umbra slumped forward into Rasnor's arms. A cold chuckle from the shadows. Derek whirled as a blade of ice slid into his gut. Moldor emerged from behind a pillar, madness glinting in his eyes, a dozen guards at his back. He leveled a blaster at Derek's head, lips curled in cruel triumph. "How touching," he sneered. "I knew you'd lead me right to her, Earthling." Derek's blood ran cold as Moldor's blaster pressed against his forehead, the madman's eyes glinting with cruel triumph. Rasnor and Umbra glared daggers, but slowly lowered their blasters to the deck, seething with impotent rage. Moldor's guards surged forward, brutally wrenching their arms behind their backs. "Tie them up," Moldor ordered, never taking his gun off Derek. "They'll all face a firing squad for treason." The guards cinched the restraints viciously tight, the plastic biting into skin. Derek's mind raced, desperate for any way out. His gaze fell on his discarded engineer's toolkit, laying just inches from his boot. A crazy idea formed, his last gambit. Derek drove his heel into the toolkit's emergency release, popping the lid. It slammed into a control panel with a shower of sparks, shorting out the lights. The brig strobed with blazing light and plunging darkness. Derek sprang in the flickering shadows, knocking Moldor's blaster away. They crashed to the floor in a savage tangle, trading vicious blows. Umbra and Rasnor seized the moment, overpowering their startled guards with brutal efficiency. Moldor's hands clamped around Derek's throat in a crushing grip, slamming him against the wall. The Gamilon's face contorted with pure hate. "I should have killed you myself the moment you interfered, Earthling scum," Moldor seethed, fingers tightening. Derek clawed futilely at Moldor's wrists, spots swarming his vision. Umbra snatched a fallen blaster and fired. The bolt took Moldor in the shoulder, spinning him around with a howl of pain and rage. Umbra leveled the gun at Moldor's head, finger tightening on the trigger. Derek staggered up, rasping desperately. Umbra hesitated, torn between justice and revenge. Seizing the distraction, Moldor lunged for a guard's blaster. Rasnor tackled him a heartbeat before he reached it. They crashed to the deck, a vicious tangle of flying fists and snarling curses. "Go!" Rasnor roared, grappling furiously with Moldor. "Get to the command deck! Stop the fleet!" Umbra hauled Derek to his feet, and they sprinted out, sealing the brig behind them. Derek's heart pounded like a war drum as he navigated the maze of corridors, following Trazin's map. Rounding the final turn to the command deck, they skidded to a halt. A squad of Moldor's elite guard filled the passage ahead, plasma rifles already swinging to aim. Derek tackled Umbra down a side shaft as a storm of blaster bolts scorched the air above them. They ran full tilt, the guards pounding boots right behind. At the end of the passage, Derek palmed a control panel. The blast door slid shut with a hydraulic hiss, the guards thudding into it a second later. "The command deck is through here!" Derek shouted over the sounds of the guards trying to force the door. He and Umbra burst onto the bridge and froze. The entire crew had weapons pointed right at them, faces hard. Umbra slumped against the bulkhead, all hope draining away. "No," she whispered. White-hot rage surged through Derek's veins, burning away all reason. He whirled to face the sealed blast door, the guards seconds from breaking through. "Come and get me," Derek roared, all self-preservation abandoned as he charged headlong into the guards' fire. Derek charged forward at the guards swarming towards him and Umbra, a wordless roar of rage and desperation tearing from his throat. Blaster bolts sizzled past his head, the air reeking of ozone. Beside him, Umbra screamed, "Derek, no!" and lunged to pull him back. But just before the guards opened fire, a sharp voice rang out across the command deck. "Stand down!" Weapons lowered, helmeted heads swiveling in confusion. The wall of guards parted to reveal a bloodied and battered Prince Razna, a defeated Moldor in cuffs at his side. Derek and Umbra gaped in disbelief, hardly daring to hope. "Moldor is under arrest," Razna declared, his voice like steel, "for high treason against the Gamelon throne." Shocked murmurs rippled through the bridge crew. Moldor snarled and strained against his restraints, but the guards held firm on Raznor's command. Umbra let out a choked sob and flung herself into Raznor's arms, hugging him fiercely. Derek clapped Razna on the shoulder, a giddy laugh bubbling up his throat. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd won. Wasting no time, Derek raced to the communications console, fingers flying over the controls. With a final decisive keystroke, he took the jammer offline. Trazen's haggard face instantly filled the view screen. "Prince Razna, Princess Umbra," the old general exclaimed. "Thank the ancestors you yet live." "Trazen, we've taken the flagship," Umbra reported, her voice cracking with relief and exhaustion. "Moldor is our prisoner. We have the evidence of his crimes. The fleet must stand down immediately." "Understood, Your Highness," Trazen said, his shoulders sagging as a crushing weight lifted. "Patching you through to the Armada now." The view screen flickered, replaced by the looming shapes of the Gamelon warships, their terrible cannons primed to unleash oblivion on the helpless planet below. Umbra squared her shoulders and lifted her chin, every inch the regal princess. "Attention all ships, this is Princess Umbra. By my authority, the attack is cancelled. Moldor has been exposed as a traitor and is under arrest. You are hereby ordered to stand down at once and await further instructions." A tense silence descended on the bridge, everyone holding their breath. Then, like a row of falling dominoes, the Gamelon ships powered down their weapons, the amber glow fading from their gun ports one by one. The collective sigh of relief was cut short, as King Orzin himself suddenly appeared on the view screen. His normally stern visage was slack with profound relief and joy at seeing his children alive. "Raznor, Umbra, I feared the worst when your signals went dark." "We're all right, Father," Raznor assured him. "It was a near thing, but we prevailed. Moldor's treachery is ended." Umbra turned and pulled Derek into view, ignoring his weak protests. "Derek risked everything for us, for our people. Without him, all would have been lost." King Orzin regarded Derek with something approaching wonder. "Earthling, no, Derek. It seems Gamelon owes you a debt we can never fully repay. You saved not just my son and daughter, but our entire civilization from destruction." Derek ducked his head, cheeks burning at such effusive praise from a king. Umbra twined her fingers with his and smiled at him, her eyes bright with more than gratitude. Behind them, a seething Moldor glowered in his restraints. All his plots and schemes crumbled to ruin. But Derek barely noticed the fallen tyrant. His entire universe had narrowed to Umbra's hand in his, the future stretching ahead, the promise of something more hanging unspoken but shining between them. The knife flashed in Moldor's hand as he hauled Umbra back, the blade biting into her grey skin. Derek and Razna froze, exchanging a tense glance before lowering their blasters to the deck with a clatter. "I'll see you burn for this, nephew," Moldor hissed, spittle flying from his lips as he dragged Umbra towards the escape pods. "You and your meddling earthling." Umbra writhed in Moldor's grip, then slammed her heel down on his instep. Moldor howled and his chokehold loosened. Umbra twisted free as Derek and Raznor charged. Raznor caught a vicious kick to the chest, staggering back with a grunt. Moldor slashed at Derek's face, forcing him to jerk away. The knife skittered across the deck. Moldor dove for the blade. Umbra snatched it up first, knuckles white around the hilt as she leveled it at Moldor's throat. He froze, real fear flashing across his face. "Give me one reason I shouldn't gut you now, you coward," Umbra ground out through clenched teeth, the knife quivering in her grip. Moldor's gaze flicked to Derek and Razna, desperate. Mercy, please! Umbra tensed, the knife drawing a bead of blood. With an anguished howl, she flung the blade away. It clattered to the deck. "You're not even worth it," she spat. "Rot in the deepest hole." Moldor crumpled, all defiance drained. The guards hauled him up and away. Rasnor gripped Umbra's shoulder. Umbra nodded, but a haunted shadow lingered in her eyes. Derek stepped closer. Umbra blinked hard. "I will be. It's just... He was family, Derek. I trusted him, and he used me, betrayed us all." A shudder rippled through her. Derek touched her hand, felt it tremble. "I'm so sorry, Umbra. I can't imagine that pain, but your people, your family, Rasnor, me, we're here for you. You're not facing this alone." Umbra met his eyes, her own glassy with unshed tears. "Promise?" Derek held her gaze, steady and sure. "I promise. Where you go, I go." Raw emotion charged the air between them. Umbra laced her fingers with Derek's and sagged into his side, letting his strength steady her. As one, they turned to the viewport, watching Gamelon swell to fill the glass as the flagship carried them down, down, down towards home. The flagship shuddered as it pierced Gamelon's atmosphere, the purple sky filling the viewports. Derek stood beside Umbra and Rasnor, heart pounding with anticipation and unease. The events of the past days still felt surreal, the desperate flight from Moldor's treachery, the pulse-pounding infiltration of the flagship, the euphoria of victory giving way to grim uncertainty about the future. As the ship settled onto the palace landing pad with a hiss of hydraulics, the ramp lowered to a deafening roar of cheers. Thousands of Gamelons packed the plaza, waving banners and chanting Umbra's name. Rasnor grinned and clapped Derek on the shoulder. "Sounds like you're a hero of the people now too, Earthling." Derek mustered a weak smile, Umbra's hand tightening around his as they descended the ramp into the blinding sun and adoring crowd. He scanned the sea of faces, unable to shake the prickle of danger up his spine. A flash of movement in a shadowed alcove, a glint of metal. Derek's blood turned to ice. He slammed into Umbra, tackling her to the ground as a blaster shot shrieked overhead, scorching the air where she'd stood a heartbeat before. Screams erupted, the crowd scattering in panic. Derek covered Umbra's body with his own, blaster already in hand, searching wildly for the shooter. Rasnor whirled, zeroing in on a dark figure fleeing the palace walls, a wisp of smoke curling from a hole in the stone. "Assassin!" he roared. "With me!" His guards charged after him as Derek hauled a shaking Umbra to her feet, spinning to place himself between her and any further attacks, pulse thundering in his ears. The acrid stench of ozone stung his nostrils. King Orzin shoved through the chaos, his face ashen with fear. He gripped Umbra's arms, looking her over frantically for injury. "Umbra, praise the ancestors, you're unharmed." He turned to Derek, naked relief warring with grim urgency in his eyes. "Get her to safety now." Derek nodded sharply, already moving. He rushed Umbra into the palace, one arm tight around her waist, blaster up and ready. His head swiveled as they jogged down the vaulted halls, alert for any hint of danger. Bursting into the throne room, Derek sealed the blast doors and did a rapid sweep, Umbra sinking into a chair, her face pale but composed. Orzin paced like a caged animal, his ceremonial robes billowing. "I don't understand," he growled. "Moldor is in chains, his conspiracy exposed, and his fleet in our hands. Who would dare strike at us now?" Before Derek could hazard a guess, Rasnor charged in, his expression stormy. Derek and Umbra leapt to their feet. "The assassin?" Umbra asked, fear sharpening her voice. Rasnor shook his head grimly. "Escaped, but not before leaving a calling card." He held up a blood-spattered data chip. "Coded transmissions. Moldor hired the Black Nebula mercenaries to slaughter our entire family, likely as insurance in case his coup failed." Umbra swayed on her feet, shock draining the color from her face. Derek reached for her hand, steadying her. She gripped him like an anchor in a storm. "They'll just keep coming then," she whispered hoarsely. "Nowhere on Gamelon is safe for me now." Orzin ceased his pacing, his shoulders slumping as the weight of centuries seemed to press down on him. When he raised his eyes to Derek, they burned with desperate need. No, there is one place even Moldor's hired guns won't be able to reach her. He took a deep, shuddering breath. Earth. Derek's head snapped up, certain he'd misheard. Earth, but we're not... Derek. Orzin gripped his shoulders, his tone intense and pleading. You're the only one I can trust with my daughter's life now. Hide her among your people. Keep her safe until this threat is eliminated. I beg of you. Derek sought Umbra's eyes, a whole conversation passing between them in a glance. Trust, need, determination. She gave him a small nod. He turned back to Orzin and straightened his spine, meeting the king's gaze head-on. I swear on my life, Your Majesty. No harm will come to her. Orzin nearly crumpled with relief. Go now, there's no time to lose. In a whirlwind of activity, Derek found himself prepping a small cloaked ship for launch. Umbra a silent shadow at his elbow as they stowed supplies and ran pre-flight checks. As the engines warmed up with a rising whine, Razna pulled Derek aside, his customary gruffness softened by naked concern. Take care of her, he said roughly. She's the strongest person I know, but everyone needs someone to lean on sometimes. He held Derek's gaze meaningfully. He reached over and squeezed her hand gently as he input Earth's coordinates. Hey, we're going to get through this, okay? You and me, together. Umbra tore her gaze away from the viewport to meet his eyes, and he could practically see her shouldering the mantle of brave determination. She returned his grip fiercely. You're right, she said, managing a small but genuine smile. I'm ready to face whatever comes. Earth is your world. Show me how to live in it. Derek grinned, warmth and fondness and burgeoning hope chasing away the day's shadows as he engaged the hyperdrive. The stars stretched into blurred lines of light around them, Gamilon vanishing into the cosmic void behind them. It will be the wildest study abroad semester of your life, Princess. He waggled his eyebrows theatrically. Hope you're ready for a crash course in the wonderful, bizarre, bewildering ways of humans. Umbra huffed a laugh, the sound startled but real, her eyes sparkling with returning mischief. Bring it on, Earthling. If I can survive Moldor, I can handle your strange species. Derek smirked, raising a challenging brow. We'll see about that. Welcome to the adventure of a lifetime, Your Highness. And as their ship hurtled towards a little blue marble suspended in the infinite black, a fragile feeling fluttered to life in Derek's chest. That maybe, just maybe, the two lost souls beside him could find a new home in each other, no matter what dangers the galaxy threw their way. Derek's heart raced as the cloaked Gamilon ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, Umbra at his side. They'd spent weeks planning their new identities, backstories, living arrangements, every detail to blend seamlessly into human society. The ship set down in a secluded field. Derek and Umbra emerged, Earth's yellow sun warm on their faces. Umbra experimentally flexed her fingers, marveling at the unfamiliar sensation. Derek grinned. You haven't seen anything yet, Princess. Welcome to Earth. They threw themselves into campus life, enrolling in a full course load as transfer students. Derek patiently taught Umbra the intricacies of human behavior, from slang and pop culture references to social cues and dating norms. Umbra proved a quick study, her natural charisma winning her fast friends and admiration. But it was the quiet moments with Derek that she treasured most, cooking together in their apartment, his laughter mingling with sizzling pans. Heated discussions of human literature, art, history, the electric anticipation when their hands brushed reaching for the same book. Late one night, hunched over a shared laptop, Derek stole a glance at Umbra's profile in the screen's glow. Words rose in his throat, but he hesitated, pulse hammering. Umbra met his gaze, quirking an eyebrow. What is it? Derek swallowed hard. Coming here with you, building this life together, it's made me realize how much you... A deafening boom rattled the window. Campus alarms blared. Derek and Umbra locked eyes, an awful realization and dread passing between them. They sprinted outside. to find a black nebula assault ship perched on the quad, ramp lowered. Armored mercenaries poured out, blasters spitting deadly light. "Fan out," the lead merc roared. "Find the targets." Screaming students scattered. Derek seized Umbra's hand. "Run!" They pelted across campus, ducking and weaving. A blaster bolt sizzled past Derek's ear. He skidded to a halt, shoving Umbra behind a low wall. "They found us," Umbra panted, eyes wide. "How?" Umbra nodded grimly. As one, they broke from cover, charging the mercs. Derek tackled the nearest one, slamming his helmeted head into the pavement. Umbra scooped up his fallen blaster and opened fire. They fought back to back, a seamless whirlwind of deadly grace. Derek smashed, Umbra blasted. Black-clad bodies hit the ground. But there were too many. Derek cried out as a bolt clipped his shoulder, flesh sizzling. Umbra whipped around at his shout, and a merc lunged from the shadows, rifle leveled point blank at her chest. "No!" Derek threw himself forward. The world slowed, his heartbeat thudding in his ears. He crashed into Umbra, knocking her aside. Searing agony exploded in his gut as the mercenary's shot meant for Umbra punched through his stomach. He crumpled to the ground, blood spreading across his shirt. "Derek!" Umbra screamed. Unholy rage contorted her face. She brought her blaster up and fired, the bolt catching the merc square between the eyes. He dropped like a sack of cement. Umbra fell to her knees beside Derek, pressing trembling hands to the ragged hole in his belly. Crimson seeped between her fingers. Derek's head lolled, eyelids fluttering. Don't you dare," Umbra stammered, tears streaking her face. "Don't you leave me." Derek tried to speak, but only a wet rattle escaped his lips, blood bubbling. The world grayed at the edges. With a wordless cry, Umbra heaved Derek over her shoulders in a fireman's carry. His blood soaked her back as she ran, an animalistic howl of desperation and fury ripping from her throat. She crashed through the ER doors, nearly toppling an orderly. "Help him," she begged, laying Derek on a gurney. He was deathly pale, breaths shallow and thready. "Please." Doctors and nurses swarmed, shouting orders. They rushed Derek away, leaving Umbra standing helpless and blood-soaked, a chasm of terror yawning in her chest. Umbra jabbed at her comlink with shaking fingers, Orzin's shocked face filling the screen. "I'll send a ship immediately," Orzin said without hesitation. "With a stasis pod, it will keep him alive until we can heal him." "Hurry," Umbra whispered. "Please." She sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. Helpless to do anything but pray to ancestors she'd never truly believed in, that the universe wouldn't be so cruel as to give her a taste of such joy, such love, only to rip it away. A distant rumble shook the hospital walls, nearly drowned out by the wail of sirens and screaming monitors. Umbra stood, new dread coiling in her gut. She raced outside, hope warring with terror, to see fire blossoming in the night sky. A Gamilon ship straining to evade the green blaster bolts of a black nebula cruiser. "No," Umbra breathed. She watched in horror as the dogfight raged across the stars, the Gamilon ship barely ahead of the mercenaries' onslaught. A lucky shot clipped the Gamilon wing. The ship lurched, belching smoke, and plummeted into a spiral. It vanished behind the trees lining the hospital grounds, the telltale boom of a crash echoing a second later. Umbra ran. Branches slapped her face, roots catching her ankles. She crashed into a clearing, the Gamilon ship a crumpled mess in the center. She wrenched the hatch open, the tang of leaking fuel and scorched metal choking her lungs. In the flickering light she saw it, the stasis pod, their last hope. "Hang on, Derek," she panted. "Just hang on." Umbra sprinted back into the hospital, shouldering past startled staff. She skidded into Derek's room, and her heart stopped. He was grey as ash, chest barely rising with each rattling breath. The doctors exchanged grim looks over his bed, shaking their heads. "No!" Umbra shoved them aside, ripping out IVs and monitors with abandon. She heaved Derek's limp body over her shoulders once more. He was cold, so cold. She ran like she'd never run before, vision blurred with tears. The cloaked ship, the pod. It was their only chance. A cold laugh rang out behind her. Umbra spun, Derek sliding to the floor. A black nebula mercenary emerged from the shadows, blaster leveled at Derek's slack face. A cruel smile twisted his lips. "Preference dead," he spat, "but I'll take alive." White-hot fury exploded in Umbra's chest. She stepped deliberately between Derek and the mercenary, fists clenched. "No," she snarled, eyes burning. "You want him. You go through me." His finger tightened on the trigger. Umbra tensed, ready to leap, to rip, to claw, to do anything to protect the man she loved. The night erupted in blaster fire. Umbra had only a split second to register the searing pain punching through her abdomen before her legs gave out and she crashed to the deck. "Umbra!" Derek's scream rang in her ears, raw and agonized and terrified. Through flickering vision she saw him lunge from the pod, pale and blood-soaked, staggering drunkenly. He slammed into the mercenary, knocking the blaster away. They grappled, Derek's blows wild and uncoordinated but fueled by desperation. The merc snarled and fought back, fists thudding into flesh. But Derek was relentless, even as his blood painted the floor. With a wordless roar, he smashed the mercenary's head against the bulkhead, over and over, until the body went limp. Derek crawled to Umbra's side, pulling her into his lap. Tears carved tracks through the grime on his face. "Stay with me," he begged, voice cracking. "Don't leave me." Umbra smiled faintly, tasting copper on her tongue. She reached up, cupping his cheek with a trembling hand. "You kept your promise," she whispered. Each word was agony, darkness closing in. "Wherever I go, you go." Her hand fell away. The world went black. "No!" Derek clutched her tighter, sobs racking his body. "Umbra!" But she was still, growing cold in his arms. His anguished howl shattered the night. Derek knelt before King Orzin, head bowed, shoulders slumped under a grief too heavy to bear. In his hands he cradled an urn. "She saved my life," he said hoarsely. Tears dripped onto the polished metal. "And I couldn't—" His voice broke. Orzin stepped forward, clasping his shoulder. "You brought her home, Derek?" The king's eyes shone with unshed tears. "That's what matters." Derek nodded numbly. He couldn't speak past the lump in his throat. Raznor took the urn, cradling it with reverent sorrow. "What will you do now?" Derek looked up, a new fire kindling in his hollow gaze. "Maldor, the Black Nebula, they're still out there." He stood, hands clenching into fists. "And I won't rest until every last one of them pays for what they did to her." He turned on his heel and strode from the hall, a man with nothing left to lose. As his ship pierced Gamelon's atmosphere, Derek's eyes fixed on the stars. Out there somewhere, Umbra's killers thought they were safe. His jaw tightened. He'd keep his final promise to her, no matter how far he had to go or how long it took. They'd pay. He'd make damn sure of that. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.